and engaging in these violent practices. And since then, I've been doing this work at the front lines, organizing, and it's expanded into a realm of intersectionality, understanding that law enforcement violence, structural racism, and mass incarceration have so many angles of intersection, whether it's black, brown, indigenous, LGBTQ, people experiencing mental health challenges, homelessness, whatever, education. You can't not be activated and involved in this work and not have an angle that's going to connect to another angle, that's going to connect to another angle. So that's what I do, and that's why I'm here. And as I grow in this work, I'm thinking to myself, I'm currently raising a daughter in the neighborhood where Jessica Hernandez, a 16-year-old LGBTQ, 17-year-old, was shot and killed by Denver police for sleeping in a vehicle. Report came through that there was a suspicious car in an alley, and police responded. There were five youth in the car, and police opened fire on the driver's side door. And luckily, no one else was hit, but it killed Jessica Hernandez. And these are the kinds of conversations we have. We have to understand that Jessica Hernandez can be killed, Tamir Rice can be killed. We have to have a conversation with our youth at much younger ages. We have to be able to prepare them to navigate interactions with structurally racist bodies, whether that's law enforcement, whether that's being profiled at a supermarket, whether that's just the ignorant bigot who you will see day in and day out, or if that's just vocalizing your opinion on something you disagree with. And there'll probably be an opportunity before you leave here tonight to challenge an opinion that conflicts with something you believe. And the more you begin to do that, and the more you challenge your comfort zone, the easier it's going to be. I want to open it up for questions, but otherwise, thank you for listening. Start here and then we'll go back.
So can you talk about the work you're doing around the new DA and maybe share with us and give some information background about how the Denver DA is supervised and elected and maybe doing some forums? Because it seems that that is an important place for us to be involved.
Yeah, actually, it's great because the way we've started to power map pressure points that can actually shift or lead to some sort of change that's going to save lives in the community is we figured out who really are key players, and the district attorney seems to be, in our eyes, a body that perpetuates law enforcement-related violence because the current structure is we will never indict you, and we will never have to spend any time in jail for any violent action that happens, that transpires in any interaction with community. So over the summer, we tried to recall Denver District Attorney Mitch Morrison. In the 11 years he's been in office, and he created a third term for himself after he ran unopposed after the first 8 years. He has not once charged an officer or deputy with felony assault or homicide. And these would be cases of excessive force. These would be cases that really infuriate the community. And the reason we chose the district attorney is because, one, it was an unprecedented effort to recall, and two, if we have a district attorney that's willing to indict officers for violent acts against community, it will set a standard for other officers to understand that, look, you cannot get away with these kinds of behaviors. You will be indicted. You will face charges. And the only thing isolated about these types of instances and incidents that we can see nationally recently are the amount that have actually been prosecuted, because these types of interactions have been happening in black and brown indigenous communities forever. So we tried to recall the district attorney. We had 60 days to gather 53,924 signatures, and we fell short. We did, but it was the first time it had been done. We collected 20,000, and we brought this election to the forefront of the community's attention. So now we have a race with 4 candidates, and we've never had a race so public in Denver's history around the district attorney. who are fighting for support from the community around issues like not only law enforcement abuse, but homelessness, the bail structure. Currently, 65% of the people in Denver City Jail are there because they can't post a bail of anywhere between $100 and $1,000. And actually, that falls into the realm of the city attorney because those are mostly municipal trespassing, vagrants, and things like that. But that contributes to mass incarceration. If we don't have a DA that's talking about reforming the bail structure, that's talking about letting people out of jail who don't belong there in the first place, or that this is the best resource we have for mental health, then that's a problem. If we have a DA who doesn't understand structural racism, that's a problem. So this has been a very public election, and we're currently, we did a big forum after the MLK March in January. We took back the march, actually. We re-navigated about 2,000 people, and we stole it from Mayor Hancock and Governor Hickenlooper and all these other folks. And then we did a candidate forum right afterwards at the Trinity United Methodist, where all of the candidates who are currently running came and answered some well-structured questions from our group, the Denver Justice Project, and community members around what they're going to do differently, how they're going to restructure this office and make this office an actual resource for the people that it's allegedly supposed to represent. So, I mean, and another example, so the DA plays currently a very limited role in reentry. Why is that when you're one of the primary components contributing to mass incarceration by prosecuting in the first place? So that's why we chose the DA. We're currently putting together teach-ins. We did a rough rundown last Sunday, and we're going to be doing them up until the election in November, just around getting to know your DA, getting to know the actual power of this office. It's actually the highest paid state elected official. He makes almost $250,000 a year. And he, you know, it's an office that's been operating behind a closed curtain for a very long time. So we put together this teach-in to educate the public around the true power that the district attorney has. The DA has the power to leverage plea bargains. So in this war on drugs, the DA, judges have lost power, mass incarceration has skyrocketed, and DAs have become more powerful. They can lobby, they can do all of these things, and they have the discretion whether or not to charge us as community members, and they have the discretion whether or not to charge law enforcement who engage in violent practices. We'll jump over here and then we'll go over here.
You already answered it, man. It was going to be like what percentage of police were actually indicted for police brutality out here, but you
Yeah, and just to highlight on that a little bit, so last year we had a man killed, so Marvin Booker was killed in 2010 in the jail. Police killed him with a chokehold. And then later, it surfaced that under instruction of the deputies, Jamal Hunter, who was another inmate in the jail, was being repeatedly tortured by other inmates under the instruction of deputies. They put bags over his head, they scalded his genitals with boiling water, all types of crazy things. And between those two settlements alone, it cost us $9.25 million. So Denver budgets millions of dollars every year to settle these cases out of court because they know that they're going to happen. And we actually exceeded the amount that was set aside for these types of cases and caused us to dip into our general operating budget to settle just 2 cases. And both of these cases came out of the jail. But in 2013, per capita, I'm not 100% sure how they make these determinations, but we were number 2 next to Baltimore for the most malicious police force in the United States. Denver has these types of statistics that surface once in a while around the abuse that their law enforcement engage in and the lack of charges that have ever been filed to bring these types of individuals to justice. So we've had one time in Denver's entire history, 1992, DA Bill Ritter indicted an officer who was off duty and shot a man 25 times. And he was actually later acquitted and never spent time in prison for it. But that was the only time in Denver's history that an officer has ever been charged with a felony crime. And only twice in Colorado has that ever happened.
Wow.
And one of the times was in Denver in 1992. So very seldom. And the charges you will see, so they disputed the recall heavily. They heavily disputed the recall. And they said, no, we charged officers, and all of these things are trying to dispute our facts. And so the list that they sent of officers being charged, there were charges for rape, there were charges for DUIs, there were charges for all of these other things that, this is not what the community is talking about. We're talking about the racial profiling, and we're talking about the violence that stemmed from that. We're not talking about, oh, so you charged a black deputy for smacking an inmate across the face for third-degree assault. Yes, that is a terrible thing. You should not be engaging in those types of practices when you're inside the jail. But we're not talking about minor assault charges. We're not. There was actually a case, Anthony Waller. He was assaulted in front of a judge by a deputy, and the DA's office neglected to charge this individual. And the judge later came out. A district court judge said that they were negligent and they should have charged this deputy with third-degree assault. Should have been felony assault, but the statute had ran for the opportunity to charge misdemeanor assault, and that is the kind of thing that we're talking about. We're talking about cases where people are blatantly assaulted by these officials in plain daylight or on camera or at night, and you have neglected to bring charges every single time. Yes.
Oh, I was gonna say too, I've worked for a long time with Amnesty International, and your case sounds like a lot of the cases we write about that happen in third world countries. In banana republics, and it's just shameful. I'm wondering what happened to the officers who were involved in your case.
That's a good question. So, in my personal case, the city, there are criminal charges. These are handled by the district attorney. There's a discipline procedure, and this is called the discipline matrix, and the discipline procedure has to do with policy violations, and it has to do with the guidelines of policing. Were there any infractions on the way? You made contact with the suspect. The worst that can come out of the discipline matrix is a termination. You can get suspended, you can get demoted, all of these other things. But so there were no criminal charges ever filed. And then the discipline matrix, the internal investigation launched by Internal Affairs, after the first one proved to be unreliable, and they launched the second one. It took 4.5 years because the city froze the investigation. The FBI got involved. And the FBI, they were doing a civil rights investigation for the Department of Justice. And these are actually two separate investigations. You're looking at civil rights violations on behalf of law enforcement, which would lead to also criminal charges. And meanwhile, the city should only be looking at policy and procedural violations. You know, they are totally separate. So you shouldn't be basing findings off the FBI investigation to conclude whether or not your officers on a local level violated policy and procedure. Which is also why we focused on the DA, because the discipline matrix has numerous opportunities for officers to appeal discipline that's offered by the police union. So say the manager of safety fires an officer, the police union comes and appeals their termination. And it sends them into this limbo, and they can do that all the way up to the Colorado Supreme Court. So we figured that if the DA was more responsible, we wouldn't have to worry about messing with the matrix, because you would be facing criminal charges, and if you went to jail, the matrix wouldn't matter anyway. But so in my case, the FBI comes in and they're doing this investigation 4.5 years later, and this, I kid you not, this is what happened. We did a demonstration on a Tuesday, shaming the city, primarily the mayor and manager of safety and civil service commission, for this length of time that they've been reviewing my personal case, and how they still haven't reached a conclusion. They had reached conclusions on these other two cases involving these officers, and the officers were fired for those other instances. But so we did an action on a Tuesday, and we publicly humiliated these individuals, and that Friday, the manager of safety decided not to discipline those officers, and then he resigned 2 weeks later. Yeah. So for my personal case, no, there was no discipline whatsoever for any of the officers involved. Yes.
So, my name is Landau. My suburbs here. We live in the suburbs in Aurora, and for good reason. We're just going to enough